Last time we watched the VOC string a chain of forts and harbors across the whole road to the Indies, owning the doorways, holding the choke points. But a doorway is only yours if you can stop someone else walking through it, and the world was full of someone else's. The Portuguese, who had been there first, the English, snapping at the same trade, the Spanish, and the great Asian kingdoms whose coasts and waters the company had simply moved into, uninvited. To hold what it had taken, the VOC needed force, and so a trading company, a thing meant to buy and sell, quietly built itself into one of the most formidable military powers on the planet. Not a country with an army with a balance sheet. Remember the charter from the very first episode. The Dutch state had handed the VOC the right to keep its own army, build its own forts, and wage its own wars. Most companies, given such a power on paper, would have used it sparingly. The VOC used it constantly and built it to a scale that is hard to believe even now. At its height, the company kept tens of thousands of soldiers in Asia and a fleet of warships to match. It manned forts from the Persian Gulf to Japan. Historians have called it, with good reason, the largest private army the world had ever seen, and one of the largest military forces of any kind in its age, answerable not to a king, but to a board of directors and their shareholders. Read that plainly. The men deciding where to point those guns were not generals serving a crown. They were businessmen serving a dividend. And the soldiers themselves were a strange army. Many were not even Dutch. They were Germans, Scandinavians, men from across Europe, recruited by the company, shipped east, and put under arms in the service of a corporation. They swore no oath to a nation. They fought for a wage, for a firm, in a war for trade. It was, in a sense, the first great private military of the modern age, and it would not be the last time the world saw an army that belonged to a balance sheet. And the businessmen had a target, their old rivals, the Portuguese, who still held the best choke points of all. The greatest of them was Malacca, a fortress city guarding the narrowest gate in all of Asian trade, the strait through which the spice of the East had to pass to reach India and the world. Whoever held Malacca taxed half the commerce of the Orient. So the VOC laid siege to it. With its fleets, and again with Asian allies, it blockaded and battered the Portuguese fortress until, in 1641, the city fell. A second choke point, prized from Portugal by force. And as we saw last time, Ceylon and its cinnamon followed by 1658. Piece by piece, harbor by harbor, the company was not merely competing with the old Portuguese empire, it was dismantling it and stepping into the ruins. But there was another rival, and that quarrel cut deeper, the English. The Dutch and the English were both Protestant, both at war with Spain, often allies in Europe, but in Asia they were competitors for the same spice, and competition between them turned ugly. The worst of it happened on the island of Amboyna in 1623. The VOC governor there accused a group of English traders of plotting to seize the Dutch fort. They were arrested, interrogated under torture, and put to death by the company's officials. I will not dress this up. Men were tortured and executed by a corporation acting as judge, jury, and executioner over its commercial rivals. Back in England, news of Amboyna caused fury. It was printed, retold, and nursed as a grievance for generations, a wound between the two nations that would still be bleeding decades later, helping push them into open war. Because the rivalry did not stay in Asia, it came home. Across the middle and later 1600s, the Dutch Republic and England fought a series of wars, the Anglo-Dutch Wars, and at the heart of them was trade. Who would carry the world's goods? Who would dominate the sea lanes? Who would win the riches of the East? These were wars between nations fought by national navies, but the prize was, in large part, the commerce that companies like the VOC controlled, and Amboyna, that old wound, was named again and again as a reason for English anger. It is a strange thought, but a true one. A corporation's quarrel over spice had helped set two countries at each other's throats, and the fortunes of the VOC now rose and fell with the cannon fire of national fleets. This is the knot at the center of the VOC's whole existence, and it is worth holding on to. Was it a business, or was it a state? The honest answer is that it was both, hopelessly tangled together, so that a company's grievance could become a nation's war, and a nation's war could make or break a company's profits. The line between the firm and the country had dissolved. Where the Dutch Republic ended and the VOC began was a question even the Dutch could not always answer. But the VOC's enemies were not only European. The greatest threats it faced came from the powers whose lands it had pushed into. Its own capital, Batavia, was twice besieged by the Sultanate of Mataram, the dominant power of Java, in 1628 and 1629. Tens of thousands of Mataram troops surrounded the company's city, determined to drive the intruders into the sea. Batavia held, barely, behind its walls and its guns, but it was a reminder that the company ruled on Java only as long as it could defend its fences. Elsewhere, it fought the seafaring kingdom of Makassar and others, breaking rival trading powers to enforce its monopoly. Again and again, the pattern was the same. The VOC met Asian states not as a guest, but as a military rival to be defeated. And this is the truth the company's account books try to hide. The VOC is remembered as a trading firm, pepper and ledgers and dividends, but across 2 centuries it behaved, again and again, as a sovereign power. It declared wars, it signed treaties, it besieged cities and was besieged in turn. It conquered, it occupied, it ruled. It was never just a business with guns, it was a nation that happened to pay dividends. We'll follow the receipts inside the company next, to the rot eating it from within. By the late 1600s, the VOC stood as a military superpower of the Eastern Seas. It had broken the Portuguese, fought the English to a standstill, and held its ground against the great kingdoms of Asia. Few states on earth could match its fleets. None could match the strange thing it was, a war machine owned by investors, conquering for profit. But here's the oldest lesson in history. Empires are rarely killed from outside. They rot from within. And while the VOC's guns still ruled the sea, something quiet and corrosive had already begun, inside its own counting houses, to hollow the giant out. Tareekh ka Hisaab, history, audited. Hisaab abhi baki hai. The account isn't settled yet.